In this video, I'm going to be showing how to add an SSH key pair to your Cyberus Jupyter Lab instance so that you can push and pull code to your private repositories on GitHub. First, you're going to want to make sure that you're in your root directory. You'll be able to tell by looking in your File Explorer on the left side of the screen, and you should only see a file icon and a slash here. If this is a brand new Jupyter Lab instance and you haven't added any new files, you should just see the data and home directory. This is important because we won't be able to clone any GitHub repositories into this data directory or the Cyberus data store. Next, from your control panel, look for the Git extension, press it, and then press clone a repository. Next, we're going to clone a public repository which has code which will make it much easier to create our SSH key pair. This code is in the cu-esil Cyberus utils repository, and I'll put the URL for this repository in the description of this video to make it easier to navigate to. Next, click Code, choose HTTPS, and copy this URL. From here, paste the URL into the Jupyter Lab text box and click Clone. You'll now see the Cyberus utils repo in your File Explorer. And click on this. There is a Python notebook and an R script version. You can use either of these for the remainder of this tutorial. However, I will be using the Python notebook. Once you open the notebook, you may be asked to select the kernel. I'm currently using the macro systems application. You may be using the ESL 2024 application by this time or some other application. Just make sure to choose the kernel if you're using Python that's named after the application that you're using. If you're using R, you can go ahead and choose R. And you can also check always start the preferred kernel if you'd like. Now, there's a lot of code in this first cell, and if you're interested in what's going on, I suggest that you read through this code. You can see how to do all of this from scratch. However, we will only need to run this cell. First, you'll be prompted for your GitHub username, and then your email that's associated with your GitHub account. This is only to give you credit for your commits. So while it is important, it's not ultimately important. These aren't actually going to be creating credentials for your key pair. At the very bottom, you're going to see your public key output, starting with SSH all the way to Jovian at this string. So go ahead and copy this to your clipboard now, this entire thing. Go back to GitHub. On the top right, go to your profile, and then go to Settings in the menu. On the left side, underneath Access, you'll see SSH and GPG keys. Go ahead and click on this. Now, I have a lot of SSH keys already added to my GitHub account. You might not have as many, or you might not have many at all, and that's okay. The only thing that you're going to want to do is click New SSH key. You can name it whatever you like, but for this, I'm going to name this Cyberus Jupyter Lab, and then I'm going to paste this SSH key. Again, this key is exactly the output here. Next, I'm going to click Add SSH key. If I scroll down to the bottom, I'll see Cyberus Jupyter Lab here. Okay, so the SSH key was first created in our Jupyter Lab, and then we copied the public key to our GitHub. One note about this, If you destroy this Jupyter Lab instance, let's say you do some work, you get your output, you save it to the data store, and you don't want to burn any more core hours, so you shut this Jupyter Lab down. The next time you go to create a Jupyter Lab, you will have to redo this process because this SSH key will be destroyed when you destroy this instance. Because of that, when you do destroy an instance, in order to keep your SSH keys organized, you may want to also delete the SSH key from your GitHub account. Okay, so we have the SSH key added and put on GitHub. So let's test out cloning a private repository. For this example, I will use one of my own private repositories. If you would like to test this, you will need a private repository that you have access to. You will not have access to this private repository that I'll be using in this example. You can see that this is a private repository because it says private here. So in order to test this, I will go to the green code button. And earlier we used the HTTPS URL, but now that we have our SSH key added, we have to use the SSH URL. So we'll copy that, go back to Jupyter Lab. I'm back in my root directory, and you can get back to your root directory by clicking on this file icon. Next, I'll go to the Git extension again, choose clone a repository, paste the SSH URL, and click clone. You'll see that this was successfully cloned. Now, I wouldn't have been able to do this before I added my SSH key because one, we use the SSH URL, and two, this is a private repository. So if we click on this, we'll see that there's just one file in the repository called demo.txt. We'll see that this is the original file. So now we'll test that we can make a change to a file, commit that change, and then push that change back to our private repository. So let's go ahead and change this file to, this is the change file. Do Control S to save this file. Now, because in our file explorer, we're inside of this Git repository, when I go back to the Git extension, it's going to look a little bit different. Here, I can manage and see all the changes that I've made to the files in this repository. Because I've just made a change to this file and saved it, I see underneath the change section, the demo.txt file. In order to commit this file and commit this change, I need to first click add or stage this change. So now it moved from changed to staged. And now I need to type a commit message. So I'm going to call this initial commit, an initial commit. And I can click commit. If I were actually committing real changes, I would give a much more descriptive description and summary here. But for the sake of this demo, I just chose initial commit. Next, you're going to see this little orange circle popped up next to this cloud, and it's going to say push committed changes ahead by one commit. Go ahead and click that. We'll see it was successfully pushed. So let's go back and make sure that that actually happened. So if we refresh our GitHub repository, we'll see now we have an initial commit. It was just committed now. And if I look at the contents of this file, I'll see that this is a change file. So everything's working. We're able to clone a private repository. We're able to make changes and push them to the private repository on GitHub. If you have any questions about anything here, I will leave my email in the description. I would be happy to help if you run into anything. Thank you.